The discovery is completely unique. We have terracotta servants who could serve him.
They also find the head of the terracotta warriors. And the archaeological team came to this area and they start to dig.
For over 2 millennia, the first Chinese emperor, Qin Shi Huang, was protected by the Terracotta Army intended to rule after death.
This is an emperor who's obsessed with rediscovering lost knowledge. His ambition is to become, in life, like the god.
However, when cutting-edge AI technology eventually scanned his quiet clay troops in 2025, the results astounded historians globally. There were things concealed beneath the surface that may completely change our understanding of his reign, his authority, and his idea of immortality. Qin Shang's underground army. The arid farmlands near the northern Chinese city of Xi'an were starting to crumble due to drought in the early spring of 1974.
The emperor conquered 6 kingdoms and unified China for the first time in history.
In an attempt to locate water, a few Xiang villagers made the decision to dig a new well. One of them was a farmer called Jifa Yang. His shovel struck a hard object around 15 feet down as he plowed through the pale dirt. He initially believed it to be broken china or an old roof tile. A clay head the size of a human then rolled out of the pit. A torso, pieces of armor, and bronze arrowheads sparkling in the dust were among the additional items that followed. They had just sliced through the roof of one of the most amazing archaeological sites on the planet, and none of them could have predicted that. An army that had lain undisturbed for over 2,000 years was buried. Some of the bronze arrowheads were collected to sell for a few pennies, and the farmers piled the pieces close to the field's edge. If Jiao Kongman, a local cultural authority, hadn't heard reports of weird statues around the well, the discovery could have ended there. When he noticed the clay figures while driving out to investigate, he knew right away that they were something special. Jiao alerted the Shui Provincial Archaeological Institute and started gathering every piece he could discover. Excavation crews arrived in a matter of months, and the magnitude of what they discovered compelled China to build a whole museum complex over the excavation. The location would be protected from the rain and the increasing numbers of tourists by the additional structures.
We're at the center, at the heart of this unbelievable World Heritage Site.
First Pit appeared to be a silent battlefield stuck in time when it was cleared enough to see. Row following as if they were waiting for a command that would never come. A row of life-sized clay soldiers stood in formation, their heads raised and their armor expertly crafted. Behind them stood clay horses that originally pulled wooden war chariots, and they faced east, the direction of the opposing kingdoms that China's first emperor had subjugated. In the 3rd century BC, the ruts on the floor still showed where the wheels had rested, even though the chariot wood had long since decayed. The scale was unimaginable. According to current estimates, there were hundreds of horses spread throughout multiple subterranean pits, more than 8,000 troops, and more than 100 chariots. Just a portion has been dug up. Pit 1, the largest chamber, is roughly 755 feet long and slightly wider than 200 feet. It is roughly 100 feet long and somewhat wider than 100 feet. With 153,000 feet of floor space, it covers more than 2 full fields or 3.5 acres. The soldiers are positioned 16 feet below the former ground. Pit 1 is just the start. Imagine a huge subterranean hall with heavy dirt walls dividing it into lengthy aisles. 11 parallel tunnels that stretch east to west are described by archaeologists. In the past, their ceilings were made of enormous wooden beams covered in layers of packed clay and reed mats to keep water out. Pit 1 would have felt like a covered staging area prepared for deployment in its original condition. The front attackers, a vanguard line of soldiers, are positioned at the eastern end. Long weapons are held by columns of armored infantry in the center behind them. To protect the flanks, troops turn outward along the sides and back. It is organized just like an actual army would get ready for battle. Pit 2 displays strategy, while Pit 1 is the big display of strength. It has a proper combined arms arrangement and is close by. Troops of all kinds were organized to cooperate. Excavators discovered cavalry groups with kneeling archers caught in mid-draw, standing saddled horses, and chariot crews positioned from their horse-drawn carts as though prepared for battle. According to recent counts, Pit 2 has several hundred fighters, about 100 horses, and many chariots that are split up into separate sections, much like the wings of an army in action. At the time of their initial discovery, a few of the kneeling archers still had remnants of paint on their armor and shoes. Pit 3, which is smaller at roughly 5,600 square feet, has a unique function but can accommodate significantly fewer figures. It is set up like a command post, with just a few dozen officers and one chariot pulled by 4 horses. According to academics, this room served as the Army's headquarters, where top commanders would have stood in charge of the troops arranged in the bigger pits. When Pit 4 was later found, it was empty and an incomplete chamber, indicating that the project may have been ongoing at the time it was shut. Pit 3 exhibits less fire damage than the others, and some of its pigments are still remarkably vibrant. It provides the most accurate view of how the entire army once appeared in full color due to its preservation. The complex is still full of surprises even after 50 years of exploration. A very ornate officer figure, a life-sized senior commander standing close to 2 chariots and several horses, was discovered by archaeologists digging in Pit 2 in late 2024 and early 2025. His rank is shown by a lofty, ornate headgear and intricate designs on his carved armor. Such high-status figures are incredibly uncommon, according to Chinese academics. Since 1974, there have only been roughly 10 top-tier commanders identified. Just as astounding as their quantity is the manner in which these figures were created. Each warrior weighs several hundred pounds and is approximately 5.5 to 6 feet tall. They are powerful but hollow. The legs resembled thick tubes made of clay. The torsos were constructed independently as big shells. Heads, hands, and arms were made separately and then combined while the clay was still wet. Fine details were pressed into the surface. Facial features were molded, and seams were straightened. Even belt knots, armor plate stitching, and fingernails were carved by hand. The clay was more than just regular soil, according to analysis. When samples were examined under a microscope, scientists discovered a mixture of minerals including quartz and kaolin with local loss, a fine yellow silt that is typical in northern China. Loess dries to a firm finish and compacts with ease. Kaolin provides smoothness and suppleness, while quartz contributes strength and grit. Production crews sculpted and assembled the figures once the mix was meticulously prepared, perhaps in centralized facilities close to the location. In the 3rd century BC, an industrial-scale operation run by the state evolved rather than the creation of a single talented sculpture. There are still remnants of that system. It is evident that molds were used for standardized pieces when certain aspects, such as the base forms of hands or heads, are repeated. However, an artist would alter each molded piece once it was created. No 2 warriors are exactly the same thanks to those hand-finished details. These figures have completely varied jawlines, cheekbones, ears, hairlines, and even moods when you stand in front of them. Some noses are straight, while others are crooked, and some faces appear serene, while others appear stressed. Even lines pressed into lips that resemble healed scars are seen. Researchers have used machine learning and high-resolution 3D scanning to determine whether such variation is based on actual persons or purely artistic taste. An AI algorithm looks for patterns that a human eye might overlook by comparing thousands of microscopic parameters, such as ear angle, chin depth, or the way one eyelid folds. The ear forms and facial asymmetry are so distinctive that it's difficult to imagine they were created from scratch, according to teams that performed in-depth scans of warrior heads. The working theory is that real people who served under the first emperor may have acted as models for at least some of the higher-ranked figures, particularly officers. Rank and responsibility are also indicated by variations in armor and attire. Senior officers have tall, ornate headgear and hefty, layered breastplates. In order to withstand rain, chariot drivers are designed with protective caps and solid stances. While kneeling archers carry light armor that enables them to twist and fire, cavalry troops wear shorter, tighter coats made for riding. Each stance has a corresponding military mission. After paint and lacquer deteriorated, what's left are the gray and brown hues that are apparent today. In the 1970s, when excavators first removed figures from the ground, they discovered vivid colors still adhering to the surfaces. Vibrant blues and purples from minerals based on copper, fresh pink on the cheeks, black hairlines, rich reds from cinnabar, and even ornamental patterns painted on armor lacing. Chinese purple, also called Han purple, and a synthetic barium copper silicate, was one of the pigments found. It was one of the first artificially created purple pigments in history. A thin layer of lacquer, a natural resin extracted from the sap of the Asian lacquer tree, covered those colors. Lacquer creates a glossy, glass-like seal that resembles transparent varnish when it is applied and dries. Before applying the vibrant pigments, artisans first applied lacquer to the clay figures to produce a smooth, moisture-resistant surface. While the concept worked flawlessly in antiquity, it proved disastrous for contemporary archaeologists. The old lacquer dried and shrank as it came into contact with air, causing the paint to flake off nearly immediately. In the early excavations, scientists watched helplessly as vivid colors disappeared before their eyes, often in as little as 15 seconds. Entire pigment layers would disintegrate in a matter of minutes. In order to conserve any remaining color, crews were compelled to halt excavation and use chemical stabilizers. In order to keep the last remnants of paint from vanishing, conservators now apply those treatments as soon as new surfaces are discovered. The idea of a true combat army is completed by the weaponry found with the soldiers. More than 40,000 bronze weapons, including swords, long spears, lances, halberds, dagger axes, crossbow gears, and numerous arrowheads, were previously wielded by the clay figurines. The premium material of the time was bronze, an alloy of copper and tin. Soldiers could stab or hook opponents from a distance with the halberd, a pole weapon with a projecting blade. Bundles of meticulously packed arrowheads in groupings of roughly 100 were discovered by archaeologists. Each bundle's composition was consistent within itself, but somewhat different from the bundle next to it, according to chemical analysis. Archaeologists have identified a network of connected pits, dispersed around the same field beyond the main troop chambers. Through hundreds of excavations, they have found groups of clay officials and attendants, pits containing suits of stone armor, and bronze chariots buried with actual horses. While one pit recreates a serene garden scene with bronze ducks, cranes, and swans set around what was once a stream bed accompanied by musicians. Another pit even shows entertainers, acrobats, and strongmen in motion. These results show that the location was intended to be a tiny representation of the emperor's kingdom, complete with entertainers, animals, and people, rather than just a military exhibition. What or who are they protecting if this is the army? The answer can be found beneath a huge mound that might be the deadliest tomb ever constructed. Within the first emperor's prohibited tomb, a massive earth pyramid that appears serene from a distance, but is scary when you realize what lies beneath it, is located in the middle of the entire site. In the center of the site, he was interred in a tomb beneath a massive mound. The underground grave of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, is sealed by the 249-foot-tall mound, which is about the height of a 20-story structure. Its base extends hundreds of feet in all directions, creating a broad, flat-topped pyramid encircled by remnants of an old gate and defensive walls. Work on this burial project started when Qin Shi Huang was still a youth, and proceeded for about 40 years, from about 246 BC to 208 BC, according to both historical sources and contemporary research. According to historical reports, up to 700,000 people, laborers, artisans, and prisoners were compelled to excavate, transport, and construct the immense underground complex and the massive mound that isolated it from the outside world. Mass burials discovered during excavations west of the main mausoleum area have been connected by archaeologists to the laborers who constructed the complex. More than 100 skeletons were found in a single gravesite. The majority were young or middle-aged men, many of whom were in the 1540 age range. Their bones exhibit severe physical strain. These laborers may not have come from a single hometown. According to research on skull shape and ancient DNA, some were from far to the south, some were from the north, and some had characteristics that had nothing to do with the Shanxi region. According to later accounts, some laborers and even some palace women were killed or buried close by after the project was completed, preventing them from revealing what had been constructed. Surveys and scans reveal that the underground palace is a whole walled compound buried underneath rather than just one room. There is a 13-foot-tall masonry perimeter wall inside. The dimensions of its inner rectangle are approximately 280 feet from east to west and 159 feet from north to south. The core-like armor is encased in a shell made of a second wall of packed earth that is 30 to 40 yards tall and thick outside the brickwork. From each side, sloping tunnels descend to the center. The main burial chamber, which is roughly 262 feet long, 164 feet wide, and nearly 50 feet high, is at the center of it all. Its ceiling is around 100 feet below the surface of the earth today. There have also been indications of sewers and what appears to be an underground dam, evidence of the flood protection measures designed by the builder. This grave was not like any other. It was built like a stronghold. The fact that the central burial chamber has never been uncovered is what makes this location unique. Qin Shi Huang's real tomb, which is thought to contain his body and valuables, is still sealed just as it was almost 2,000 years ago. All around it, archaeologists have conducted excavations, discovering horse holes, chariot pits, and what seem to be the remains of palace foundations close to the mound. They have discovered officials, musicians, and the outlines of whole courtyard buildings set up like the capital city of the emperor's afterlife. However, there has never been a breach of the core chamber entryway. Ancient writings, ground-penetrating scans, and chemical measurements of the nearby soil and air are the sources of all the information we have on what is beneath the hill. The historian Sima Qian recorded the earliest known description of the tomb in the 1st century BC, around a century after the emperor's death in 210 BC. He said that full-scale structures, castles and towers brimming with precious antiques and treasures might be found in the underground chamber. He asserted that rivers and oceans created by flowing liquid mercury inside. The tomb replicated the empire in miniature. He claimed that although the floor below depicted China's mountains and valleys, the ceiling was painted with constellations and the stars of the night sky. He talked about mechanical defenses, crossbows that were set up to shoot invaders automatically, and lights that burned forever and were created from the fat of a bizarre marine species he called a manfish, possibly a whale. Scholars argued over whether any of the stuff was real or merely fable for centuries. However, contemporary science continues to uncover unsettling proof that backs up Simon's claims. The mercury is one of the most unnerving aspects of this location. When mercury evaporates, toxic vapor is released. Mercury is a silvery liquid metal that remains fluid at ambient temperature. Simeon's assertion that there are rivers and seas of mercury inside the tomb has been verified by contemporary readings, and the findings are unsettlingly true. Mercury levels in the soil surrounding the mound have been found to be significantly higher than typical for the region. The mud contained approximately 1,140 parts per billion of mercury in certain samples, And subsequent investigations discovered hot areas with concentrations above 1/200 parts per billion. More than 2,000 years have passed since the first emperor took his final breath, yet his secrets still whisper beneath the earth. If what lies inside that sealed tomb is even half as extraordinary as the legends suggest, then the story of Qin Shi Huang, the man who dreamed of immortality, might just be beginning, not ending. Perhaps one day, when technology dares to open those forbidden doors, we'll finally see what the world's been waiting for. Until then, the Terracotta Army stands guard, silent, eternal, and watching, eternal, and watching.